One of those would be dedicated to DWI and potentially domestic violence prosecutions. We're trying to get our numbers up in the latter area. With regard to the DWI prosecutions, we already do, if I may say so myself, we already do an excellent job with our DWI prosecutions when compared to other state and municipal agencies. So we are punching well above our weight class with regard to that. And we look forward to growing our team and continuing that success. The purpose of the other prosecutor would be to relieve our LCPD officers from their in-person courtroom obligations. The last thing that we want is police officers to be queued up, waiting in the docket when they're prosecuting some of their own petty misdemeanor cases. My goal, or rather our goal, I should say, is to have those police officers freed up so that they can spend their time doing what we think of as traditional police work, whether it be community outreach, community policing, traffic enforcement, et cetera. And then we have our full-time public defender that will be on site. I'm really excited about this. We will have a full-time public defender, and that represents a couple of notable changes that will benefit the city. The first of which would be a sizable cost savings initiative, because it will be economically much more feasible, but also it would represent to our indigent defendants no gap in service, no gap in representation, and that would bring us at or even exceeding the level of service being provided by our state and federal counterparts. So I'm pretty excited about that. Ankle monitoring services. That will assist, and that will be in a case-by-case basis. Not everybody is going to be put on ankle monitoring or GPS monitoring. That'll be a case-by-case basis where our municipal court judge or judges will have to decide that that's a level of care that that individual requires. That'll assist in protecting the community at large and identifying when clients require a higher level of care. If there's an issue with possible substance abuse, if there's an exclusionary zone where the accused should not be as part of their conditions of release, we will be able to monitor those persons and to address those issues as they arise. I'm excited about the partnership program between our municipal court with input from LCPD and the Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization line of business. Natalie Green has been very, very helpful with regard to that, so I wanted to give her a shout out. And then, of course, funding for services provided by our nonprofit partners. I do want to add that our municipal court has added a new case manager. That person will be a point of contact between the individuals seeking services and our community partners. They'll be able to identify needs. It will be a very needs-based intensive program, and we are, again, I don't mean to repeat myself, but we're looking to reduce recidivism and to kind of approach a holistic approach of treatment for clients on a case-by-case basis. And so that would include, of course, counseling, treatment for substance abuse and mental health disorders, MAT appointments, which stands for medical assisted treatment, home visits, harm reduction, income and housing support, and even transportation to and from clinics as needed, medication management. And I believe our case manager and additional staff at municipal court would also be assisting those in applying for Medicaid who qualify for it and who desperately need it. And that is my presentation, and I'll be back if there are any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Jeremy Story, Police Chief. The Real-Time Crime Center, which I've been talking about for a while, so I'll try to summarize it as quickly as I can. The funding that we've received from both the state and our federal partners is being used to improve or establish technology within the city itself, the city as a whole. Right now, our unfunded needs are to be able to launch the Real-Time Crime Center are the things you see listed below. So it's all the things that need to happen within the police station to really get the center up and running. These are one-time costs. $400,000 would be for renovations of both our intelligence section and our crime scene area, which would also make it a quad lab that we'd be able to do more processing in the lab area. $200,000 for construction of the real-time crime center area, servers and server cooling equipment, and then $500,000 to equip and install the real-time crime center in that space to include all equipment. These are some renderings of what the actual center in the police department would look like, the video monitoring wall on that back wall, and then all the workstations. For staffing needs, these would be out of the general fund, but just to tie it all together, commissioned sergeant will oversee the real-time crime center. That position already exists. 2 real-time crime center technicians are being reclassified right now from vacant positions for cost savings to the city, and then 3 additional positions will be added this year at 50% to help round it out. And just as a separate note, really this isn't from the Telshore Fund, but the city manager wanted me to mention the park rangers, and Mayor Pro Tem, you already asked about it. We've asked for 3 park ranger positions to be added to this year's budget. These are uniform sworn but non-commissioned personnel with limited enforcement authority. So think police service aid, codes, animal control, similar enforcement capability. And they ultimately increase the safety and utilization of our parks. If our parks aren't safe, all the improvements we do are for naught because people will not use them and people are scared to go to them. A lot of the associations that are already not coming to our parks because of safety concerns will hopefully come back. As a side note, I was in Mesa, Arizona with my wife a couple weeks ago now, and we went to a park and they had like a citywide fair with all the departments, and so the park rangers were there. So I went to talk to them and kind of get the rundown on how they run their program. They've been around for a long time, since the 80s. At one point they had 35 park rangers. 2008, 2009, the recession hit and they went all the way down to 3, and they're back up to 16. But they were telling me the park that we were in that day, a year and a half before that, you could not go with your family. It was infested with drugs and gangs and violence. And that day you would have never known it because it was a beautiful park. There's tons of people everywhere. And that's the goal that we want here. That's what we want to emulate. And all the models we've seen nationwide are very similar. They have limited enforcement authority. They have a uniform presence for deterrence. And they act as that kind of in between a police officer and a security guard. And so they do other things, including education. They do a lot of community outreach, but they ultimately are there to try to keep the park safe and deal with the issues we're seeing right now. And I will turn it over to Natalie.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Natalie Green, Housing Revitalization Administrator. We have 3 items on the budget request. The first is to finance the development loans for the Peachtree Canyon Apartments. That would include both Phase 1 and Phase 2 for a total of 288 units. There is a pre-commitment for Phase 1 in the amount of $4 million, which we'll be closing on within the next 60 days. And then we anticipate Phase 2 later in the year in the amount of $6 million. We are also requesting gap funding for the Amador Crossing Apartments. So we've received a commitment from the state for just under $6 million. We do anticipate that the total cost of development will be around $4 million. We are currently applying for other sources to reduce the gap in the commitments from the city, but we'll also be looking at some of those value engineering to make sure costs stay reasonable. And with that, I'll pass it on to Chris.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, Chris Favor, Economic Development Deputy Director. And we're going to touch on the cannabis excise tax and some proposed uses for MRA redevelopment. So just to recap, the tax applies to retail sales of non-medical cannabis products. The sales commenced April 1st, 2022. And tax is currently 12%, rising 1% increment starting July 1st, 2025, with a maximum of 18% July 1st, 2030. To date, revenue we've received is about $1.5 million, and we're proposing $400,000 from that fund to jumpstart MRA programming. And what can that MRA programming look like? So here's a few examples of some things that we can do. So last summer, council had updated the city's LEDA program, which is the Local Economic Development Act program. And so to include retail as an option. So funding those retail programs with this funding is possible with the MRA. We could also look at matching grant programs for commercial and revitalization public-private partnerships. Another thing we could look at doing is small business support programming. Specifically, cannabis businesses struggle because of the federal restrictions on cannabis. They are not eligible for a lot of the same free business services that other businesses are. So there's a gap there that some of these funds could help fill. And potentially funding could be used to pay for future MRA planning. So as everybody knows, in March of 2023, council adopted the El Paseo South Solano MRA, which we are currently going through the early stages of the planning process. And right on the heels of that, council also adopted the West Picacho MRA, in which we are in the very, very early stages of that planning process. So by late 2024, we will have 2 MRAs under planning, and council could look to adopt, a couple more of those proposed MRA areas from the designation report that was done in 2022, and presented to council in 2023. So those are just a few options for how to use the cannabis funds. Okay, big finish. So how do we continue the momentum? So city manager put forward an aggressive approach through the FY25 budget and recommendations for funding from the Telshore Fund and cannabis revenues. And those are all a good start. But what we really need to do is establish a funding source for sustainable capital improvements. So first we need to identify what are the needs. And so working with staff, and I believe Stephen mentioned this earlier when talking about parks. Previously, there's been a strategy of deferred maintenance. And so that has caught up to some of the city facilities. And so we're looking to overcome some of those obstacles and move forward with a more proactive approach. And all the while looking to increase quality of life opportunities for all residents. And those would be in the areas of public safety, police and fire, street improvements, park improvements, and then public facility improvements as well. So what are some potential ways that we can generate that extra revenue? Well, we already have an aggressive capital outlay approach, but as we know, legislators prefer to fund the last mile of projects, right? So if you come to them and say we need, gap funding to get us across the finish line, they're more inclined to provide that funding. Another option is property tax increases, and the problem with the property tax increase would be that it doesn't share the tax burden with everyone who enjoys amenities. Again, as Stephen mentioned before, and as David mentioned with streets, visitors, people passing through the community, they could take advantages of our services as well. Go bonds. So we have a successful Go bond campaign over the last few years, but as council knows, that's a limited amount every 4 years. Another option to look at would be a potential GRT increase, which would include contributions from residents, tourists, and people passing through the community. So how do we get there? So we need to consider bold options to set Las Cruces up for future success. And so under that, we're recommending a bump in the local portion of the GRT. And so doing that could actually generate up to $20 million additional dollars per year for these particular capital programs. There's money that could be generated simply through ordinance, and there's additional monies that could be generated through a public referendum. And to sort of give you a sense of what that increase would look like for the general resident, that's about a 56-cent per $100 increase on goods and services. Council would also have the option to restrict a portion of that for specific use if they wanted to.
Any idea what the rent would be at the Peachtree Canyon and at Amador Crossing? What would be the affordability indicators, and for whom, what population?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, so for Peachtree Canyon, We have the ability to go up to 80% of area median income, given the level of funding sources. The rents would be based on whether they're a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom, but they are typically below fair market value. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but I can send that chart. A 1-bedroom sits at about $750. But
$715 for a 1-bedroom?
It's around there, but the market rate for $100, so it's well below that market. And then all affordable housing projects have an affordability restriction, so they will stay affordable for anywhere to 30 to 40 years. And so those rents will be restricted for that period of time.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Revenue stream. Once that is gone, that will be gone. And I think we all have to just deeply understand what that means. And so just so that I'm clear, Barbara?
Barbara Van Como.
Oh, there she is. Sorry, Barbara. You're usually right over there. Just so that I'm clear, every presentation here was for a request to come out of the Telshore Fund, correct? No, okay. Yes.
That's right, Mayor Pro Tem, Barbara Bencomo for the record. No, there were some items that we spoke about here that were actually budgeted out of the general fund.
Okay.
The legal programs, for example, and the police real-time crime center techs, those new tech positions are budgeted out of the general fund as well. So there was kind of a mixture.
Okay, great, thank you. I did want to make sure that we were being clear on that. And then obviously the cannabis,
Right, cannabis.
for the MRAs, yes, thank you. For municipal court then, the additional, so the PD was, we said, the public defender was a reclassification, so that's covered there. And then the case manager was also a reclassification, I
That's
believe,
correct.
So those are covered. And then the request for the ankle monitors, would that be a brand new request out of the
That
transfer
is a
fund?
new request, and that is budgeted out of the general fund.
Okay, I'm wondering about that from the general fund, I'm sorry. Oh,
That's
okay.
right.
Okay, great. I was about to be like, I don't know. Okay, that's good, thank you. And then obviously, you know, I think we want to bring Judge Filosa back for a fuller presentation on municipal court and their needs. And just wondering if they know about this request and if they're, and if they're sort of set up to handle a program for ankle
Absolutely.
monitors.
So we reached out to the judge and staff over at Municipal, and they provided us with the particulars and the estimate for the funding required to
Okay.
support that program.
Great, thank you. Barbara, do you remember, I talked about this during my comments a while ago about at the state level, many of the court fees are going away this July. Did that come up in your conversation with the judge, and how are we planning for that?
It has not come up in the conversation, so that I don't have any information about that. I'm not sure if city manager or legal has any information about that, but I have not had that
Okay,
conversation.
that's okay if it's not for today. I do just want to put it back on everybody's radar that some of those fees are going away and we'll either have to supplement or by adoption, adopt them ourselves. I'm generally not necessarily in favor of that and making it a debtor's court, but I think that is an important consideration for municipal court and their budget. I guess for Public Works on your park, and it's a beloved park, it's a beautiful park, and I definitely support investments in that, in the infrastructure there. Consideration, you know, as you were talking, and we're talking about park rangers, and we're talking about potentially, you know, parks that see a greater threat to safety. I mean, I don't want to go out on a limb because I don't know for sure. Maybe Chief can help us determine which of these parks perhaps sees more of that. And I imagine Young Park is one of those parks at the top of the list. I don't want us to say we're only going to invest in enforcement in Young Park, but we're not going to invest in the needs of Young Park in terms of infrastructure that are equally as important for public safety, for usability, and those kinds of things, right? So for me, those are like a really important balance to keep in mind as we're talking about how we look at public safety and how we invest in it. And I think even if it takes some phases to get to the needs for Young Park, as you're coming to us for requests, I believe that can be done through policy. But I'm wondering if there is going to be in the future a specific work session on Real-Time Crime Center, how that's going to work, how the community can ask questions and be involved.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have the answer to the work session, but on the town hall this Thursday, one of the things we're going to talk about is Real-Time Crime Center, the Real-Time Crime Center, and some of those concerns. But just quickly to address them, obviously there's a balance to it. And so some of the things that we do to ensure that that balance is kept in order is, one, limiting access to those that need it. Two is auditing procedures so that we're making sure that we're monitoring that the data is being retrieved for the proper purposes. And everything has an audit trail these days, which is a good thing for us. Proper policy. And so there's a lot of mechanisms in place or that will be in place to help make sure that that stays in balance.
Thank you, Chief. I think one of my biggest, in just my research around some of these kinds of tools, is around data collection. Some of the biggest questions I have, like how long we keep data for, when we share it with other entities, like the data sharing agreement. I particularly have concerns with just sharing data with entities like ICE, for example. And so I have a ton of questions around that. And I don't want to come to the town hall and take up time myself from the community members. So I guess my request would be that we have a work session.
And let me just mention, data retention is the one I missed. So retention periods, again, have to be balanced so that we are able to solve crimes and hold people accountable for victims,
Right.
but also not keep data longer where it becomes a concern. And so the retention rates that we have set now are 30 days for license plate readers, which I think is a very reasonable amount, and 7 days will be for all video. So a week is what we plan on setting it at, which is not a lot of time. It means people have to move fast if there's a crime, but it also helps assuage those fears that we're keeping data for a long time. We can go back and put something together we should.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Maybe what I'll do too is email you some questions, but I think it's really important that the community understand all of these, and I'm glad that you're having a town hall. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Or not you personally, collectively, what this means is we're facing deferred maintenance that has caught up to us, among a number of other things that we haven't funded. This is asking us to consider those projects as using the Telshar Fund to fund those projects, which would result in a lower corpus that exists in the State Investment Council, which has its own, I think, I would argue we should have a different investment strategy for it in any case, but that's not what we're talking about here. But I think one of the things that I would ask is, I think this is coming to us because we're open to this and we understand that we're at a point where public health and safety are fundamentally important and that we should fund them. What I would ask is if we did head in this direction, those organizations that have come to rely on the funds that we've been dispersing, I know that then that would also be eating into the corpus. So I'm acknowledging that would be, that has historically been the investment profits that we've used to fund that. I think that we should, at a minimum, if we consider using the Telshar Fund, the corpus of the Telshar Fund for some of these projects, I would ask that we also consider a sustainability plan for those organizations that we've been funding for a long time through the Telshar Fund with the investment revenue, those $600,000. I don't think that we should, and I think that we have been putting the cannabis revenue into the Telshar Fund? No, or in a separate fund. We considered that as one place, but I would just ask that we consider holding harmless in the speak of how we spend money, that process, and not say if we're doing this, then that will end, I guess would be my ask, is if we're considering tapping into the corpus that our ongoing investment in health and public services organizations either have a planned phase out or a different approach, those things being funded in a different way or figuring out a different way to fund that. But I would ask that we hold that harmless in this conversation for at least several years to figure out a way to keep funding it. So that would just be my ask as we consider this, which would be a different approach from what we've done in the past.
A lot of things that have been neglected as our parks, definitely in favor of the municipal courts, and that's already pretty much been budgeted. the real-time crime center and all is, I feel, I've seen it in another municipality. It's going on 10 years already that it's been in existence. I think we're just behind, and we need to get caught up with a lot of things. So we need to spend some money for our public safety and for the greater good of our community. Chris,